Imagine for a second. You're standing on a street corner in Rio de Janeiro. It's the late 1960s. The heat is rising off the pavement. The air is just thick with humidity. But there's another kind of pressure building. It's invisible, but it's heavy. You can feel it.
It's the classic pressure cooker. I mean, you can't contain that much energy without something exploding.
Exactly. On one side, you have a military regime that's tightening its grip, censoring art, arresting dissidents.
Shutting down speech.
Right. It's a very scary time to be loud. And on the other side, crashing right into that wall, is this explosion of youth culture, a culture hungry for freedom. And not just political freedom, but
sound freedom.
Sound freedom, yes.
It is a moment of just extreme contrast. You have the political darkness of a dictatorship clashing head-on with the technicolor explosion of global pop culture, the Beatles, Hendrix, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And usually when you have that kind of cultural pressure, something has to give.
And what gave way was a movement that didn't just change Brazilian music. It arguably rewired the entire global psychedelic soundscape. We're talking about the Tropicália movement.
But we're not just looking at the greatest hits today. We're digging into a really fascinating piece of writing. It's called The Phantom of the Tropics, published by MMR just last year.
And it frames this whole era not just as a music genre, which is how we usually hear about it,
right,
but as a collision of cultures.
A collision is the perfect word for it.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how these artists took traditional bossa nova and samba, which, let's be honest, were the sacred cows of Brazilian music.
Oh, absolutely.
And just smashed them together with loud, fuzzy British and American rock. It created this psychedelic music genealogy that is still alive and kicking today.
And what really stands out to me in the source material is the intention behind it. This wasn't just copycat behavior. Young musicians in Rio and Sao Paulo were hearing the Beatles, sure, but they didn't want to be a Brazilian Beatles. They wanted to devour that influence and create something that was distinctly Brazilian.
That's the concept of anthropophagia, isn't it? Cultural cannibalism. I always found that image so striking.
Spot on. It's an old modernist concept in Brazil from the 1920s. The idea is you don't reject foreign influence, you eat it, you digest it, and you turn it into something that's yours. It gives you strength.
And in 1968, that meant redefining your national identity through noise.
Exactly. They wanted to digest rock and roll and spit out something that could only happen in the tropics.
So let's unpack the manifesto. Because Tropicália wasn't just a vibe or a fashion statement. It was an organized movement.
Yeah.
You had these key figures who knew exactly what they were doing.
Right. You had Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil as the musical architects, but it went so far beyond just the music.
It was a multimedia assault.
Totally. You had poets like Torquato Neto, visual artists like Helio Oiticica. Their philosophy was explicit, redefining Brazilian music.
Yeah.
And we have to remember how controversial this was. This wasn't just kids these days.
Yep.
There were literally protests in Brazil called the March Against the Electric Guitar.
Wait, actual marches against a guitar?
Yes. In 1967, the nationalists, the purists, they saw the electric guitar as a symbol of American imperialism. They wanted pure samba, acoustic instruments, the real Brazil.
And then here comes Caetano Veloso.
And he plugs in a Fender Stratocaster and mixes it with traditional folklore. It was a political act just to plug that thing into an amp.
I love the audacity of that.
Yeah.
They basically looked at the purists who said, don't touch our samba, and said, watch us.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They took bossa nova, samba, and rural folklore and fused it with psychedelic rock. There's a quote from Veloso from 1968 that the article highlights, which I think captures the spirit perfectly. He said, Tropicália is the tropical in our souls.
The tropical in our souls. That sounds so beautiful, but knowing the context, the dictatorship, the censorship, the anger, I get the sense he wasn't talking about postcards and palm trees.
No, absolutely not. He's talking about the complexity, the heat, the chaos, the contradiction of the Brazilian experience. It's not a clean image, it's messy.
Right.
And the physical embodiment of this idea came in 1968 with the release of the compilation album Tropicália, o Panis e Circenses.
Panis e Circenses, bread and circuses. A little nod to Roman satire there.
It was their Salsite Peppers. This album featured everyone, Gil, Veloso, Gal Costa, Narleome, and the band Os Mutantes. And the source material describes this record not as a collection of songs, but as a cultural declaration.
A line in the sand.
It combined sound, visuals, and poetry into a Brazilian avant-garde. It was their line in the sand.
You mentioned Os Mutantes, the mutants, and this is where I want to zoom in, because if Tropicália was the philosophy, Os Mutantes seem like the mad scientists in the lab making it happen.
They absolutely were. If you want to understand the innovation of this era, you have to look at Os Mutantes. The notes describe them as the most innovative group of the era, bar none.
The lineup alone is iconic. You got Sergio Diaz on guitar and Rita Lee on vocals. And Rita Lee, I mean, she wasn't just a backup singer.
Oh, not at all. Rita Lee is fascinating. She brought this sweet, almost innocent vocal style, but she would pair it with these provocative lyrics and costumes that look like they came from another planet.
That contrast.
It created this really unsettling contrast with the chaos around her. And Sergio Diaz, he was doing things with fuzz guitar that rivaled anything happening in London or San Francisco.
That's high praise.
In fact, the article compares their improvisation and noise manipulation to British giants like Pink Floyd and Soft Machine.
Wow. But Os Mutantes had a different flavor, didn't they? It wasn't just Pink Floyd with a tan.
It was grittier. Their 1970 album, A Divina Commedia, O Ando Meio Desligado, is cited as a sonic turning point.
Oh, yeah.
And there's this quote from Rolling Stone Brazil from '71 that just paints such a vivid picture. Os Mutantes ate rock, swallowed bossa nova, and puked out the future.
That is a visceral image. Puked out the future. But it makes sense. It wasn't polite. It was raw. And speaking of raw, here's where I want to get into the weeds for the audiophiles listening. The sound of this record, why it sounds so distinct, wasn't just an artistic choice. It was about technical survival.
This is the MacGyver aspect of the deep dive. We have to remember the context. They were recording at Phonogram Studios in Rio. Now, in '68, '69, the Beatles are using 8-track consoles. In the U.S., they're moving to 16-track.
Which lets you layer everything separately and clearly you can control it all.
Exactly. But in Rio, they didn't have that luxury. They had 3-track, maybe 4-track machines if they were lucky, but often they were working with 2-track setups for the initial layers.
So they're trying to make this massive layered psychedelic sound with barely any tracks. What do?
They used what the article calls craftsman-like methods. They had to bounce recordings. So imagine this. You record the band drums, bass, guitar on 2 tracks.
Okay.
Then you take that tape, play it back, and record it onto a new tape while playing another instrument live on top of it.
But every time you do that on analog tape, you lose a generation of quality. You get noise. It gets blurry.
And that is the secret sauce. They embraced that degradation. This technical limitation created a unique, smudged sound image. It wasn't crisp like American pop. It was dense, swirling, and muddy in a beautiful way. It sounded humid.
Humid sound. I love that. It feels heavy in your ears like the air in the tropics.
And they were physically manipulating the tape, too. They didn't have digital delay pedals. They were cutting and pasting the reel-to-reel tape with razor blades.
Wow.
They were manually reversing the tape to create those reverse echoes that suck you into the speaker. It was so tactile. They were holding the music in their hands.
I read in the notes about Arnaldo Baptista, the bassist and sort of the wizard of the group. He was building his own gear, right?
Yeah, because they couldn't import it. Tariffs were incredibly high or the gear just wasn't available. So Arnaldo built his own fuzz circuits.
From what?
There are stories of him using components from household appliances to create distortion. And he developed this technique of subtly wavering the pitch of the instruments.
Like a tremolo bar on a guitar.
More unstable than that. He wanted to recreate a hallucinatory floating sensation. The source material argues this specific wobble was unique to South America. It wasn't precise mathematical psychedelia. It was a tropical hallucination.
Like the heat was melting the tape.
That's it, exactly. And then, amidst all this electronic wizardry, you'd have a Moog synthesizer space-age tech playing right next to a berimbau or a cavaquinho.
Ancient indigenous instruments meeting the electronic future.
That's the definition of the Tropicália sound. It's the past and the future colliding in the present.
But as we know, the late 60s in Brazil was a volatile time. The party couldn't last forever, at least not in that form. The regime wasn't just going to let this cultural cannibalism go unchecked.
No, they couldn't. By late 1968, with the decree of AI-5, a notorious institutional act that suspended constitutional rights, the atmosphere shifted drastically.
It got worse.
Much worse. The military regime became much more repressive. The Phantom of the Tropics article points out a dark turn. Many central figures, including Veloso and Gil, were arrested.
Arrested for what, exactly? Just playing music?
Pretty much. Culturally, for being subversive, for disrespecting the national anthem, for looking weird, for saying things that challenge the status quo. They were imprisoned and eventually exiled to London.
So the leaders are gone. They're in London, probably freezing, missing the sun. Does the movement just die?
It doesn't die. It goes underground. And this is a testament to the resilience of the culture. The music started flowing through what the author calls cassette tape networks.
The original file sharing.
Exactly. Student bands in São Paulo, local radio stations in Bahia, they kept the flame alive by trading tapes, bypassing the official censorship channels.
Smart.
If the radio wouldn't play it, you passed the cassette to your friend.
And while the Rio scene was getting hammered, a new sound started bubbling up in a different part of Brazil. The article shifts focus to Minas Gerais.
Right. This is the emergence of the Clube da Esquina, or the Corner Club. And the key figures here are Milton Nascimento and Lô Borges.
Now, for listeners who don't know Brazilian geography, Minas is inland, it's mountainous, it is not the beach vibe of Rio.
And you can hear that in the music. Their 1972 album, also called Clube da Esquina, is a masterpiece, but it's very different from Os Mutantes.
Go.
It was smoother. It melted the boundaries between psychedelic rock, folk, jazz, and MPB musica popular brasileira. The source describes it as a quiet trip rather than a chaotic one.
The quiet trip. That feels very significant given the timeline. It's 1972. Censorship is at its peak. People are disappearing. You can't scream anymore.
Exactly. It was introspective. It was reflecting the somber reality of the time. It was about internal landscapes, not external protests. It sounds like echoes in a valley. It's hauntingly beautiful, but there's a sadness to it.
So we've tracked this from the explosive, chaotic manifesto of '68 to the introspective, underground survival of the '70s. But the article brings us all the way to the 21st century. This isn't just a history lesson. This sound is back.
It is back, and it's evolving. We are seeing a modern revival. Young Brazilian bands are reclaiming this tropical hallucination.
Yeah.
The article lists bands like Connie Dos, Glue Trip, Oterno, but the one that really seems to carry the torch and the one the author spends the most time on is a band called Boogerins.
Boogerins. I've heard this name popping up on festival lineups. They seem to be bridging that gap between modern indie rock, Tame Impala vibes, and that classic 60s Brazilian sound.
That's a great comparison. They connect that Anglo-American indie rock with the 60s hallucinogenic sounds. But what strikes me is their commitment to the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Specifically, their 2015 album manual.
Is it true they went back to the old methods?
They did. In an era where you can record a perfect digital track on a laptop, they chose to use cassette tapes and analog mixers.
Why? Is it just nostalgia?
I don't think so. I think it's about texture. There's a quote from Dinho Almeida, the singer of Boogerins, and he says, "Like the air in Brazil, our sound is humid."
Our sound is humid. That connects right back to that smudged sound of Os Mutantes we talked about. It's like the humidity is an instrument itself.
It provides a sense of place. You can't mistake it for a band from Sweden or Canada. It grounds the psychedelia in the geography of Brazil. It implies warmth, thickness, a little bit of warping.
And this revival isn't just on the record. It's about the live experience. The article describes a specific concert by Boogerins at Cine Joia in São Paulo in 2018. And the way it's described, it sounds like a religious experience.
Incredibly immersive, yeah. The backdrop wasn't just flashing lights, it was flowing images of tropical plants. The lighting was designed to feel humid.
Humid lighting.
Warm, hazy yellows and greens. And the audio, just endless guitar drones. The source notes that the audience didn't dance in the traditional sense, they floated in the sound.
A trance state.
Yeah, and apparently the encore was the peak. The track was Lucia Fernandes. The description says it sounded like the chaotic return of Os Mutantes. The sound staff were using analog tape echoes live in the venue.
Oh, that's amazing.
To turn the entire hall into a sea of hallucinatory reverberations.
A sea of hallucinatory reverberations. That is quite a review.
It shows that the spirit of 1968, that desire to use noise to alter perception, is very much alive. It's not a museum piece. It's a living language.
So what does this all mean? We've gone from the manifesto in the late 60s through the exile, the quiet trip, to the lo-fi revival of the 2010s. What's the through line here?
I think if we look at the timeline the expert provides, the common thread is that Tropicália was never about escapism. That's a common misconception about psychedelic music, that it's just about tuning in and dropping out.
Right, leaving the world behind to live in a fantasy.
But in Brazil, it was about restructuring reality. They were living in a reality that was politically oppressive and culturally conservative. They used this music to build a new one.
A freer one.
Freer, stranger, more inclusive. They didn't run away from Brazil. They tried to dream up a new Brazil.
And the article mentions that this spirit continues, even now, with digital recording, even AI entering the picture.
Yes, the new hallucination. Whether it's analog tape or AI generation, the goal is the same: to create a new way of seeing. To use technology, whether it's a fuzz pedal made from a doorbell or a neural network, to break open the mundane and find the magic.
It really makes you appreciate how art survives. You can exile the artist, you can censor the lyrics, but you can't stop the sound.
The Phantom of the Tropics is a very apt title. It haunts the culture in the best possible way. It's always there, lurking in the reverb.
Before we wrap up, there's one final thought from the source material that I think we need to leave our listeners with. It's a quote from Gilberto Gil, one of the godfathers of this whole thing.
It's a profound thought. He said, "Psychedelia is looking at the reality inside your mind."
Looking at the reality inside your mind.
It shifts the focus. It's not about the external trip, the visual hallucinations. It's about understanding your own consciousness.
So here's our question for you listening today. We live in a world of absolute digital overload notifications, screens, constant noise from the outside. If you stripped all that away, what does the reality inside your mind look like right now? Is it a quiet trip, like the mountains of Manus? Or is it a chaotic tropical hallucination?
That's something worth exploring.
Thanks for taking this trip to the tropics with us. We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.